Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Welcome back, everyone, for the reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're continuing in our canto by canto selected verses. And today we're on the third canto. And I'm going to be reading from the text number 3, chapter 26, and the verse is number 32. And I'll do the word for word first. Tamasat, from egoism and ignorance. Cha, and Vikurvanad, undergoing transformation. Bhagavat Virya, by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Choditat, impelled. Shabdamatram, the subtle element sound. Abhut, was manifested. Tasmad, from that. Nabha, ether. Shotram, the sense of hearing. Tu, but. Shabdagam, which catches sound. Here's the translation. When egoism and ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested. And from sound come the ethereal sky and the same sense of hearing. And the sense of hearing. Let's read it together. When egoism and ignorance is agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the subtle element sound is manifested, and from sound come the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. The Sanskrit sounds something like this. Tamasascha vikurvana Bhagavad Virya Chodita Shabdamatram Abhutam Tasman Shabdamatram abhutasman Nabhashotram tu shabdagam Nabhashotram tu shabdagam Tamasachcha vikurvana Bhagavad Virya Chodita Shabdamatram abhutasman Nabhashotram tu shabdagam. Would a couple of you please chant? Bhagavad Virya Chodita Shabdamatram abhutasman Shabdamatram abhutasman
Nabhashotram tu shabdagam
Shotram Vaishnavis Tamasascha vikurvanad Bhagavad Virya Chodita Shabdamatram abhutasman Nabhashotram tu shabdagam. Purport. It appears from this verse that all the objects of our sense gratification are the products of egoism and ignorance. It is understood from this verse that by agitation of the element of egoism and ignorance, the first thing produced was sound, which is the subtle form of ether. It is stated also in the Vedanta Sutra that sound is the origin of all objects of material possession, and that by sound one can dissolve this material existence. Anavritti Shabdad means liberation by sound. The entire material manifestation began from sound, and sound can also end material entanglement if it has a particular potency. The particular sound capable of doing this is the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna. Our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. Now we must purify that sound in spiritual understanding. There is sound in the spiritual world also. If we approach that sound, then our spiritual life begins, and the other requirements for spiritual advancement can be supplied. We have to understand very clearly that sound is the beginning of the creation of all material objects for our sense gratification. Similarly, if sound is purified, our spiritual necessities also are produced from sound. Here it is said that from sound, the ether became manifested, and that the air became manifested from ether. How the ethereal sky comes from sound, how the air comes from sky, and how fire comes from air will be explained later on. Sound is the cause of the sky, and the sky is the cause of Shotram, the ear. The ear is the first sense for receiving knowledge. One must give oral reception to any knowledge one wants to receive, either material or spiritual. Therefore, Shotram is very important. The Vedic knowledge is called Shruti. Knowledge has to be received by hearing. By hearing only can we have access to either material or spiritual enjoyment. In the material world, we manufacture many things for our material comfort simply by hearing. They are already there, but just by hearing, one can transform them. If we want to build a very high skyscraper, this does not mean that we have to create it. The materials for the skyscraper, wood, metal, earth, etc., are already there. But we make our intimate relationship with those already created material elements by hearing how to utilize them. Modern economic advancement for creation is also a product of hearing, and similarly, one can create a favorable field of spiritual activities by hearing from the right source. Arjuna was a gross materialist in the bodily conception of life and was suffering from the bodily concept very acutely. But simply by hearing, Arjuna became a spiritualized, Krishna-conscious person. Hearing is very important, and that hearing is produced from the sky. By hearing only can we make proper use of that which already exists. The principle of hearing to properly utilize preconceived materials is applicable to spiritual paraphernalia as well. We must hear from the proper spiritual source. I first offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to all the previous acharyas, and to the assembled devotees. Vansha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhupi evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha nantakoti vaishnaviki jai avyakta kalachoditat. So, in this third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is about maintenance, we hear about the cosmos and also about Sankhya philosophy. Cosmology, the word itself is important for our purposes because cosmos, a Greek word, means order. The universe is an ordered system. It's different from the word chaos. The reason there's an ordered system in the universe, and the reason we can even have science, any ology indicates this same concept when we talk about logos. In fact, previous philosophers had noted that the universe has measurable patterns, and therefore they could develop controlled experiments to measure the universe in various ways. And now down to subtle matter, people measure it. It's because it's to some degree measurable and predictable. Otherwise, how will we know, besides looking at your iPhone, what time the sunrise is going to be? Because the universe is moving in a measured way. One might then say it's intelligent. There's an intelligence behind the universe. There's an intelligence within the cell. Within the double helix, there's also code. If you look deeply, as there has been research into so-called DNA, there are algorithms that predict what's going to happen, how proteins are going to coalesce and produce certain shapes and develop in various ways. There's an intelligence dictating to that, either in the cell, but beyond that, there's an intelligence in the universe that comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's the ultimate conclusion of the Sankhya philosophy taught by the theist Kapila. There was also an atheist Kapila who gave an idea that material nature is simply organizing itself, which doesn't make any sense ultimately, but I won't go into the details of that right now. Here, we also find that there's a sequence. The Vedas have described, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Brahma Samhita, have described the ways in which the universe manifests. Of course, Krishna mentions avyaktam vyaktamāpānam manyate mama budhaya param bhāvamajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. There's a manifest world that's sometimes manifest, sometimes not manifest. But beyond that, he says, beyond the manifest and unmanifest, there's another world that is always manifest. That's the supreme abode. But in this material creation, there's manifestation, there's maintenance for some time, and then there's annihilation. And then it starts over again. And as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a way in which the material nature is nondescript to begin with. It's called pradhana. It's then agitated by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When Krishna looks at it in the form of Mahavishnu, then enters the time energy, Kala. Then there's also the Jiva, who's impregnated in the material nature. And from that agitation, the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is referred to in this verse as Virya. Prabhupada translates it into the sex energy of the Supreme Lord. It's the word Virya, which means that he's a source of life. And that's also what he says in the Bhagavad Gita. The modes of material nature, by the power, the Virya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then begin to organize themselves in various ways. And there's a grossification of the pradhana, and in stages it manifests in various forms. There's 3 modes of material nature also, which create myriad forms, which are all combinations of sattva, rajas, and tamas. We can see in this world with our own eyes ways in which a single element may manifest in various ways. For instance, water. Water gets evaporated, forms into a cloud. Cloud then may create rain. It may morph into snow and various other manifestations from one element. It goes through a cycle, stages, and cycles back. So the same with the material nature. It's one element, but then by the power of the Supreme Personality of God, it manifests in different forms. Sankhya. Sankhya is meant to give us a sense of detachment from the material world. I once saw a video, I think it was in school. I don't know which teacher showed it. It was probably Mr. Schumacher. He was a real character. But anyway, it was about a man and a woman getting ready to go out for a date. And the narrator would show the man and then the woman, and from a distance you'd see the man say, "Oh, such a handsome man, isn't he?" And then he said, "Let's go a little closer." And the camera goes closer and he said, "Let's take a look at his mustache." And then with some sort of magnification, it's going into his mustache, and there's some little entities living in there. And all the kids are going, "Ew, that's gross." And anyway, use your imagination. With both of them, they go, into the skin follicles and things like that. And then all of a sudden you're looking at the handsome man, beautiful woman, and thinking, yeah, maybe not so much. And in a similar way, Sankhya gives us this perspective of the material world. It's like, let's check under the hood. Let's see what's really here in the material world, and breaks it down into all these elements. And you think you have something substantial here in the material world? Think again. There's never a time that the material world isn't changing into something else. That's why it's called bhava. Bhava means constantly morphing into something else. You can't hold it. That's why it's so frustrating for us, because we're permanent entities, whereas the material nature is constantly changing. What we thought we had then becomes a different thing. And we think, wait, hold on, come back. We keep a picture of it and keep looking at it and see, that's what it used to be. Every picture is what something used to be, because it keeps moving on after you take the picture. And here we have in the Sankhya, very practical, the most practical of observations, is that in the telescoping out of the various elements, the first consequential element and most consequential element is sound. Now, sound is subtler than ether, and it creates the ether. And there's a grossification. It's a bona fide word. It was used in Scientific American in 1848. Grossification. It means something Everything grows from subtle to gross. Everything manifests, starts in a subtle form, seed form, and then it grossifies. It becomes something that is more tangible. Even our thought system, as mentioned in 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna talks about how the thought energy comes from the lowest chakra, and then it grossifies as it moves up through the various chakras, gravitating towards the chakra that's right here in the voice box. And then we manifest that thought outwardly in the form of sound, like I'm doing right now. Kind of happening simultaneously with what I'm thinking. It's coming up and it's coming out, and then it's coming to you. So in a sense, the subtle is becoming grossified in the form of words and language, which is highly consequential because only humans can create language. Animals have communication, but they don't have language. No grammar, no syntax. They can't chant mantra, except parrots, but then they freak out when the cat comes. And they don't know. Prabhupada said that. He said, you can teach it to chant Hare Krishna, but then when the cat comes, you go, craw, craw, craw. So here in the purport, Prabhupada mentions the source of material and spiritual creation. People may think, oh, material, empirical knowledge is substantial. Not so much. It's always changing, and you'll find theories are questioned as time goes on. It's like, oh, we used to think that, now we think this. How substantial is that? What's more, material nature is hard to put your finger on because, as I already mentioned, it's constantly changing. The real substance is the spiritual world. Now, in the material world, there's a way in which we create by hearing, Prabhupada said. It's like, give an example, during the pandemic, nobody could go anywhere, touch anything, so he just talked. Let's get on a Zoom and talk about it. What's going to happen then? We're going to create. How? I have an idea. Okay, tell me your idea. Now the idea comes out in the form of words, language, and then the ingredients, where are they? Oh, I know where there's some cement. Let's put a building together. A skyscraper comes together. All of the elements were already there, but by the subtle process of hearing, then it comes together. So Prabhupada makes the point in the purport that all spiritual paraphernalia is available, and it can gather in one's life by the process of hearing. So if you hear spiritual sound vibration from the spiritual world, then all the paraphernalia needed to advance on the spiritual path comes into your purview, and you can take advantage of it. This brings us the very practical means given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, chanting the holy names, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, and thereby manifesting our original spiritual life. It's already there. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi. Sadhya Kabunoi means it's already there and you uncover it. Or, as Prabhupada quoted in this verse, Anavriti Shabdat, by sound vibration. This is the last verse in the Vedanta Sutra. By sound. Anavriti means to uncover something. And Shabdat means by sound. So by sound you become uncovered and your real nature will be revealed. Those are some preliminary remarks, and now I will take some reflections or questions. Fire away. Work with me, people. Okay.
Thank you for your class, Guru Maharaj. I'm curious, in all your encounters with public through book distribution, how do you best respond when someone wants to apply scientific rigor to the meditational practice? If they want something that can be replicated to apply the same principles, what kind of response do you typically give in a short interaction that you might have?
Actually, doing that now. I've had this little project going on to contact academics and scientists to talk to them about compare and contrast the Srimad Bhagavatam with their research. I've been talking for some time with Dr. Sloman from Brown University. He's a psychologist. He wrote the book, The Knowledge Illusion. And then we have some neuroscientists. One is David Creswell from Carnegie Mellon. And then there's Judson Brewer. I think I mentioned him the other day. He's written a book, I forget what it's called, but it's popular. What's it called?
10x.
What? No, 10x was a different thing.
Oh.
Judson Brewer studies habits. He's a neurologist and also a psychologist. Interesting combination. And the conversation, we've been finding our way, because a lot of them are interested in talking. They want to know more about the Vedic system. And I would say they're eager and delighted to find out correlations, especially when it comes to psychology of yoga, things like that. For instance, in talking to David Creswell, he talks a lot about meditation and controlling the mind through mindfulness, and especially he's writing a book on equanimity right now. And in that, he talks about tolerating, as I mentioned yesterday, benign discomfort. You have to be willing to work through benign discomfort. And in that case, I told him about Rupa Goswami's analogy that in the beginning, when you have jaundice and you take sugarcane juice, then it tastes terrible, but you have to keep taking it. But then you'll suddenly, because it's a curative, you'll taste the sweetness of it. And I was saying, he'd go, oh, this is fantastic. I love this. He's writing it all down. And as far as measurement goes, they do try to measure things. They measure parts of the brain that light up when meditation's taking place and so forth. I mean, there have been some people who have studied this with the Maha Mantra, although I don't think it's peer reviewed. Anyway, I won't even mention the person's name, but they wrote a book on it. They're a psychologist also and a devotee, and they did some measurements. But as far as the clinical measuring goes, we don't have a lot. We resonate more with the psychological aspects of, for instance, in Patanjali Muni's description of states of mind. He mentions 5 states of mind, 3 of which are non-productive. They are distracted or wandering or bored. But then there's the engaged mind and the mind that's completely absorbed in the object and so forth. And we can talk about those things and in the general sense, how the mind works and reacts, which for most people is good enough. Empirical science and information, it works well in a TED Talk, because if you get up to talk about anything, unless you say, and by the way, at Brown University, there's this guy, he also confirmed this through his science. So many people turn it off because they think, well, this sounds like religion or spirituality. But we can borrow from others because there are correlations, and we can sort of bring it, by the way, we're in conversation with such and such and so, and they also conclude the same thing through their scientific studies without us getting into clinical stuff. So, yeah, you better raise your hand quick or I'll keep talking. There's a point at the end the Prabhupada makes that we must hear from the proper spiritual source. So that comes to the subtlety of sound. First, let me say something else before I forget. In some of my research on sound and the power of sound, There's, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there's an anechoic chamber. It was built by a company that does recording for musicians. So they have a first-class recording studio, and a lot of people go there to record their albums. So as a curiosity and as a tourist attraction, they built near it, next to it, an anechoic chamber. You know what that is? There's no sound. Like right now, you could measure with your Apple Watch probably what the decibel level is in here. But in an anechoic chamber, there's negative decibels. You can't hear anything from the ambient environment. You can. It's supposed to be silent, and that's the main point of me bringing this up. It's not. In fact, the two investigative reporters who I read, who went there and spent time in the chamber, which is hard to do. In fact, they challenge people because the longest anyone's ever stayed in there is like 42 minutes before they become overly anxious and they have to get out. Some people only last 30 seconds and they said, let me out. You still have to pay. It's about $60 to go in, it used to be. And the reason is, and what both independent writers, they didn't confer with us, two different articles, they said it's the loudest place on earth. And what happens is the sound from the ambient sound is non-existent. So they can hear the coursing of their veins, they can hear the moving of their joints inside the anechoic chamber. But they hear something much louder than that. It's coming from your own chitta, from your consciousness, because all the sounds we've ever heard, not just in this life, but in previous lives, they're all recorded in the subtle body. That sound is there. And then it comes out and they have auditory hallucinations. And they're so extreme. I mean, some of them talking about they're hearing sirens going and there's voices and things like that. Because, and consistent with what Kapiladev describes, how whatever we hear, it goes in and it's recorded. And it stays there within the subtle body. So that's highly consequential for the way we develop ourselves in this life and in the next life. For instance, in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada makes this statement in the purport when Arjuna asks him, how can we remember you at the time of death? And Prabhupada mentions in a purport, he said, we're taking various bodies, varied creation by the force of material consciousness. That's the statement. This samsara, it's called varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In other words, we're being forced by our material consciousness, the sound we've taken in, it develops our consciousness, and then it forces us by material nature. Patanjali Muni says that the body we get next is the filling in of the aggregate of all our desires. And that's what Krishna says also, right? Right? Where? Yang vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante tam tami vaita konteya. Yeah, said whatever your consciousness is, that's going to force you into your next life. Patanjali Muni in this Yoga Sutra says, you have this conglomerate of all desires formed from everything you've heard. It's there in your subtle body. And he gives an example. He says it's the filling in. The material nature fills that in. So an example is if you walk on the beach barefoot with wet sand, and then you look behind you, you'll see your footprints in the sand. Now, if you were to take plaster of Paris and pour it in there, you'd make a perfect mold of your foot. You'd see every single line on the bottom of your foot, the toes, how they're shaped and all that, right? Say yes. Yes. And in a similar way, when you leave this present body, the aggregated material desires, they have a certain mold, and material nature fills it in. So check it out, what you have right now. That's the filling in of your desires from the previous life. So in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions how you can then develop your spiritual body. Because if your consciousness is spiritual, then you get a spiritual body in the next life. Whatever your consciousness is, yang vapi smaran bhabam, whatever you remember, means you're being forced to remember something because of the way you've heard during this lifetime. Therefore, the process is to recreate the internal workings of your subtle body by hearing spiritual sound. Now, the next point I wanted to make is that sound carries consciousness. You can ascertain, first of all, isn't it uncanny? Do you remember when people used to have conference calls? Now it's Zoom calls, but remember conference calls when we couldn't see anybody? And let's say there was 22 people on the conference call. Does this resonate? Have you been on a conference call with more than a few people? And I noted many times one person starts to talk and then another person, it was almost simultaneous, but one beat the other one out. I could tell from the first syllable who that was, who was about to talk. And go, oh, that was Dilip. Dilip wanted to say something, and then somebody else said, and it's like, we go back, okay, Dilip, were you going to say something? Was that you? And he's like, yeah. How did I know that? I heard Dilip say one syllable, and I could ascertain there was a form in my mind. I heard one syllable from Dilip, and the shape of that sound, it then manifested in my mind that that's Dilip. And the subtle element sound is being pointed out here. This is the key to all creation. This is the key to liberation. It's the key to Krishna consciousness. You can see the spiritual world through sound. And so it's also consequential where the sound's coming from. I'll give you a poetical example that's given by Prithu Maharaj. 4th canto, which we might investigate tomorrow, which is, he says, when somebody who loves Krishna and his only motive in life is to serve Krishna speaks, that person's sound, now the poetical part, touches Krishna's lotus feet. It mixes with the saffron particles that are on Krishna's feet. Next time you take darshan, just notice there's saffron particles on Krishna's lotus feet. And then when it enters your ear, there's transformative effect. That word here we had today about the transformative effect is Vikurvanat. You transform by the quality of the sound that you hear. And so he says, when you hear from somebody who's pure, then your heart will transform and you'll start to love Krishna too, by hearing from a pure source, a pure devotee. On the other hand, we find Avaishnava Mukun Girnam Putam Harikatam Ritam Shravanam Naiva Kartavyam Sarpochista Yatapaya. This verse given Sanatana Goswami says, when you hear from somebody who's not a Vaishnav, a Vaishnava Mukun Girnam Putam Harikatamritam, then he says, Sarpochista Yatapaya. It's like a snake who touches milk that you were intending to drink. Maybe you left it out. And then the snake came in at night, slithered up there on the counter, and took a little from the milk. And then he leaves some poison in it. So now, perfectly good substance milk, but then you drink it and you get the poison. If somebody who's a Mayavadi chants Hare Krishna, the effect is different than if a pure devotee chants it. So we should be aware of the source, where we're hearing, because sound carries consciousness. We'll take on the consciousness of those from whom we hear. Now I'll take a few more reflections or questions. Yes, Radha Mohan.
Thank you, Prabhu. In the purport, it mentioned sound also, what's the word? Ends the manifestation. So if
It
you-
what? Ends?
It says starts the creation
Oh.
and then it dissolves
yes,
the
yes,
material
yes.
existence. Thank you, Prabhu. If you could please, Prabhu, elaborate on that. How does sound, one can also dissolve this material existence through sound? Thank you.
Well, remember I was talking about Sankhya in the beginning? And you hear about the origin of everything and how you're different from matter and how matter is always moving on, so forth. By hearing, you may become disenchanted with it. Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhogaishvaya prasaktanam taya prahita chetasam, that when you're interested in the material objects of the senses, you can't meditate properly. Your mind's distracted. You can't be vyavasayatmaka buddhi, one-pointed. And how would you dissolve that connection that you have with matter? Everybody has an inherent connection with matter. This is described by the Hamsa Avatar, 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The four Kumaras are inquiring from Brahma about why the material world is so entangling. And Brahma can't really answer the question right then because he's been engaged in the act of creation, so his mind is filled with rajas. So Hamsa Avatar appears to give the answer. And I'm cutting out a lot of details, but basically what he says is, when we're ensconced in the material energy, as soon as our senses are externalized when we come out of the birth channel, they're embedded in their objects, and the objects are embedded within the mind of the living entity. They're connected already. Like, you don't have to teach living entities how to become attached to the sense objects, do you? There's no in second grade at school. It's like, okay, here's the sense objects, and now be attracted. They're just attracted because they're already connected. So we're that intimately connected with the material world. However, by hearing, as an example, Sankhya, we begin to disassemble the material world. Like, there's a conglomerating process, and so by reverse application of the conglomerating process, how do we conglomerate and get a material body? We hear about material enjoyment, and therefore material nature accommodates us with the body so we can enjoy material nature. How do you disassemble it? It's reverse engineering. That's what Krishna consciousness is. You can tell people when you meet them, like, this is about reverse engineering your life. And so when you hear about it, in Sankhya, it disassembles all the parts. And then you're left with the essence. And the idea of the senses and their objects, or the root attachment then becomes slackened and then disassembled, and that's through the hearing process. And Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janaya Yashuvairagyam Jnanam Chayarhaitukam. The Sutta Goswami says at the beginning of the Bhagavatam that when you directly hear about Krishna, then there's this natural way in which you develop detachment from the material world and knowledge about your relationship with it. That's also called Sambandha Gyan. And then you're not obligated to engage in the objects of the senses. That's one example. Does that help? Disenchantment is one of the elements I mentioned yesterday. One becomes disenchanted with the idea of engaging in the material nature. You had a point, yes.
Just a question, Hare Krishna Prabhu. So we see in the purport that Srila Prabhupada mentions that now we must, our entanglement in material affairs has begun from material sound. And one way is to absorb ourselves in spiritual sound. But naturally when one is working or engaged in family life, there may be, or the news. So what sort of moral compass should we have that rejects going beyond entanglement in material affairs?
That goes beyond what? I'm sorry.
Like what sort of internal conditions or compass should we have to reject material sound vibration beyond what we need to know?
In general, the process of renunciation is, rather than giving up, it's embracing something higher. That's the assured way of being detached. As Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishva Nivartate. He says, how's that start? Vishaya, the sense of Vishaya Vinivartante Niraharasa Dehina. So he first says, it's, even though we may say, okay, I'm not going to engage in that. Have you ever had this? Like, I'm not doing that again. Did you ever say that?
Yeah.
Please say yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm never going to do that again. And then you stop doing it. But then your mind is going like, yeah, you better do it again. Like, who said that? That's Vishaya Vinivartante Niraharasa Dehina. Although you rejected it externally, it's still going on in your head because the loop is still there, still attached to the habit, and the senses are still dwelling on it. So there's every chance that you're going to go back to it sooner or later. It's like, hey, what happened, Larry? I thought you were a vegetarian. He's like, yeah, forget that. I thought you stopped smoking. Yeah, well, that was 2 months ago. Everyone goes back because they have nowhere else to go. So, Vishaya Vinivartante Niraharasa Dehina Rasa Varjam Rasopyasya Param Drishva Nivartate. Krishna then says, when you have a rasa, a taste for something that's obviously better, you know, it's like, what happened to such and such? Yeah, I moved on. I found somebody better. The giving up of material nature is moving on to something better. And when we have that, then we're on the safe side, the ruchi, that we have a taste for our relationship with transcendental sound. When we like that better than material sound, for instance, if you're enchanted by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, let's say you get really absorbed in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, and then you walk out and somebody wants to talk about the news. You're like, yeah, maybe not. You might just humor them, depending if it's a relative, they're really excited to tell you who just, cheated who, and so forth. You may hear it, maybe something talked about in the office, but as Narada tells Vasudeva in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Vasudeva went to Narada, he said, Krishna was my son, but I never got any instruction. Please teach me all the science of Krishna consciousness. And one of them is very practical. This question of what do you do when you're Krishna conscious or developing Krishna consciousness, but you're still integrated with the material world. So Narada says that you act officially. When you're obligated to be there, then somebody may say, blah, 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 and you say, yes, sir, very good, sir, thank you very much, sir. And you go on with your meditation on Krishna, and you do your duty, because you have to code, right? Or something. You got to go, do all that stuff. But meanwhile, you continue to meditate on Krishna, and you just give lip service to the material world. Nothing deeper, not in the heart. Okay, Mahabhagavat Prabhu.
It's very fascinating how when the modes of material nature interact with the jiva, they entangle us. But when the modes of material nature interact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His energies, they produce something that ends up being a source of our liberation. Because here it said, when egoism and ignorance, so this is in the tamasic egoism, agitated by the sex energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, sound is produced and the sense of hearing is produced. These are such amazing, useful things. And no jiva or none of us, no materialist actually can create any such thing.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's because we live in opposite worlds. It's called Hlada Tapatraya. What is the high? In the spiritual world, we have Hladini Shakti, we have the Chit Shakti, we have the Sandhini Shakti. In the material world, we have Tamas, Rajas, Sattva. It gets translated into the material world in a perverse way. So those three categories of internal potency in the spiritual world, when they are brought into the material world, which is mentioned, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the Brahma Samhita, you have this sequence, Ramama, Mayaya Ramamanasya Naviyogas Tayasaha. This is several verses at the beginning of Brahma Samhita. Mayaya Ramamanasya Naviyogas Tayasaha. Said the Supreme Personality of Godhead has no relationship with the material world. So then he glances, and that glance is carried by a representative of Krishna, and the glance personified is Shambhu, which is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You know, Shiram Yatada Duvikara Vishesha Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pratagasti Heto Yashambhutam Apitata Sambapaiti Karya Govindamadi Purusham. You have this translation coming from the spiritual world into the material world. So Shambhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but it's like a lamp covered by carbon, you know, which is the modes in nature, so that he can carry out the same desire that's there in the spiritual world, but there's a perversity to it now, which is I want to enjoy the material world. That's what comes out of the false ego. And so that Hlada Tapatraya, Jiva Goswami says, what gives the highest pleasure in the spiritual world gives complete opposite in the material world. It's miserable. You engage in what you think through the original energy, the impetus to enjoy in the spiritual world, which is to serve Krishna for the jiva. In the material world, you try to enjoy sex, separate from Krishna, and then all misery starts there, and all the attachment to the material world. Such a fun topic. We have 2 more minutes. If you can sneak one more in. Yes, please. Chirag.
Hare Krishna. These are from a couple of reflections online.
Okay.
One's from Taravali Mataji. She says, Hare Krishna, I really appreciate the profound importance of sound in our spiritual lives. Hearing is said to be the last sense to leave us when we depart from our bodies. Lord Krishna has designed everything so perfectly that even until our very last breath, we can hear His holy names. And this.
Such a good point. Is there another? Okay.
One more from Nimai Prabhu. I believe there are some peer-reviewed studies pertaining specifically to the Maha Mantra and its effects. Bhakti Vasudeva Maharaj is familiar with the studies.
Okay. If you can please give me his contact information, I'd like to talk to him. Well, I hope there was something to take away, and I wasn't just rambling through. Did you get any takeaway? Maybe it's the same as the other classes that you should hear and chant about Krishna. What are you taking away?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So what I'm taking away is by sound.
I like how organized you are.
Thank you.
You know what you're taking away. You wrote it down. Go ahead.
By sound, you can become uncovered, and your real nature is revealed. Your real nature is revealed.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Gauritai, Shri Shri Radhakir Chor Gopinath, Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra. If we so desire, please let us be exclusive about our hearing so we can tune our ear to the spiritual sound vibration coming from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And may we distributed all over the world, change the world, to the tune of, in this year, at least 100,008 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we may do some serious damage to the material nature. And now a word from our sponsor. Talk about the 108,000 Srimad Bhagavatams.
Hare Krishna. I hope you're having an enlivening journey on the Bhagavad Express. We just concluded day 3 of the Bhagavatam class, but we're just getting started. Today, VAISESIKA Prabhu will be giving class at ISKCON Brampton for the Sunday feast as well as ISKCON Toronto. As VAISESIKA Prabhu mentioned, all over the world, this year there is a goal to distribute at least 100,008 sets of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as VAISESIKA Prabhu mentioned, it's going to happen. Now it's your turn if you want to join the ride and experience the thrill, or, well, there's no other choice. Please come aboard and join the adventure as Lord Chaitanya signs the check. In this purport that we read today, Srila Prabhupada said, by hearing only can we make proper use of that which already exists. And in the movement, by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, we have many opportunities of hearing. From the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have Srimad Bhagavatam available in several languages all over the world. And now, this year, by the innovations led by VAISESIKA Prabhu and the team, we also have the opportunity to have digital sets. So you can read e-sets on your phones. Also, just last week, audio sets were launched, which means you can actually listen to the Bhagavatam while you're waiting, while you're driving, and we have a lot of opportunities to do that. So just expanding the opportunities to hear. If you would like a Srimad Bhagavatam set for yourself, a digital set, e-set or an audio set, it's available for only $55. A combination of both, e-set and digital set, audio set, so you get both of them, is only $88. It's a promotional offer that we have. So if you'd like, Rahul Prabhu, can you please stand up? Rahul Prabhu is here and he's eager to help. He only does a minimum of 3 at a time. So please get to him before he runs out of the codes. And if you would like to get empowered to distribute, so sign up to distribute e-sets or digital sets, Govinda, can you stand up? Govinda can help set you up with the portal that has been designed by the BBT media team. So please get tooled up, get empowered to distribute, get one for yourself, see how it feels like, and naturally you would want to distribute. Anything else you'd like to add?
That's good. And if you
it's Nareshwar Prabhu's voice in the Bhagavatam audio book.
that's not Nareshwar, it's Damodar.
Damodar. Okay, sorry. It's Damodar Prabhu's voice in the Bhagavatam. It's a real person, thank you. It's a real person, not AI.
Yeah, AI hasn't been able to do Sanskrit very well, which is weird. But in any case, it's nice that there's the tenor of a real devotee's voice. We offer the print set, we call them print sets, and if people would also like to have an e-set or an audio set, they can take it with that. You can put them together in a little package. Or if they can't carry or accommodate the big set, the print set, then we go to the e-set, the audio set and stuff. So you can sell as a package. There's also a large set of Bhagavatams and a small set. The small set means that it's smaller in size. It's easier to carry around. And so people can take the large set and the small set, because they can keep the large set in their home, and then when they travel, they can take the smaller books with them. And then you can also, they offer them the e-set and the audio set. So that's 4. So it's better 4 in 1, that you start with that and tell people what most people who know anything are: take a big set, small set, e-set, and an audio set. And then if they don't want all 4, then at least they could take 3 or 2 or 1. Does that sound reasonable? Start at the top and work your way down. It's much more interesting process. Don't just jump right into you want an e-set, but start with accommodating them with all of the book itself is beautiful. It has form, it has pictures, and once it goes in the house, it's highly consequential because Vastu, science of Vastu means that every object has an effect on our lives, whatever we keep in our homes. And when you keep the Srimad Bhagavatam in your home, the physical form of the Bhagavatam is a deity of Krishna and will have a profound effect on the whole environment of your house. What's more, you'll have to move a bunch of junk out in order to put it in your house. Just a footnote to the excellent advice given by Shamahi. Vancha kalpataruvascha kripa sindhave evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Way to go, Vaishnavas. Knock them alive out there. Give everyone an opportunity to take the Srimad Bhagavatam. All you have to do is bring it up. Don't worry about rejection. There is no such thing. We're not dissuaded. And when people hear about it, they might take it. Thank you.